The stars had always seemed so quiet, peaceful even. For centuries, civilizations across the galaxy thought Earth was just another primitive planet, a blue rock tucked in a backwater system with nothing more than wildlife and weak, emotional bipeds trying to survive. The Galactic Order had thousands of reports filed under Earth. Unremarkable, inhospitable to advanced culture, no immediate threat. That was their first mistake. Captain Zivar of the Ular Dominion didn't want the assignment. He was too seasoned, too decorated for a mission like this, babysitting a scouting crew, orbiting a planet full of loud mammals and cheap entertainment broadcasts. Insulting. He had seen real war, fought in the blood wars of Thral, led fleets against the Morkathi Empire. Earth was a joke, but the jokes stopped 3 hours after landing. The scout team never returned. They had touched down in a rural part of the North American sector, somewhere called Montana, according to the outdated Earth maps they'd translated. A forested area with scattered settlements and minimal tech signals. It was supposed to be safe. Zivar had approved the drop himself, confident that the small 6-being team would gather the samples, set up monitoring beacons, and return by evening. But the sun set. The Earth grew dark, and the team was silent. No signals, no distress calls, just gone. Zivar's ship, the Tyrannax, hovered in low orbit, cloaked from human tech. He stood in the observation deck, staring at the planet below with a growing sense of unease. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Commander," the navigator's voice broke the silence. "We're receiving a transmission, encrypted, old frequency, but it's coming from the surface." Zivar frowned. "Play it." The audio crackled, distorted, but it was unmistakably a voice, a human one. "You shouldn't have come here," it said. Calm, measured, too calm. Then a second voice, colder. "We know what you're looking for. We've been waiting." Zivar's blood ran cold. "Trace it. Now." His crew scrambled, pulling data, locking onto coordinates. It was close to the original landing zone. Same area, same trees, but different now. The trees were gone. Burned. "Captain," the tactical officer said, eyes wide. "The scout ship. It's been dismantled. No sign of the team. But, there's something else." A hollow image projected above them. A crude but efficient structure built from the wreckage. Barriers, perimeter sensors, cameras, and standing among it all were humans, armed, ready. "They turned our own tech against us," Zivar muttered, "in under a day." No species was that fast. Unless he issued the order himself. A retrieval squad. 10 of their best. Stealth armor, plasma rifles, neural dampeners. In and out. Quick extraction. Only 2 made it back. And they weren't unscathed. One was missing a leg. The other, his mind shattered, eyes hollow, muttering nonsense over and over. "They smiled while they killed us," he kept repeating. "They smiled, like they were made for it." Zivar finally began to understand. Earth wasn't primitive. It was hiding, waiting. A planet of apex predators that had evolved not to hunt animals, but each other. For thousands of years, war wasn't just a necessity. It was a culture, a religion, a drug. Humans weren't peaceful. They were perfected violence. And someone, some group, was still watching. The messages didn't stop. Each one clearer. More direct. "You want a war?" the human voice said. "Then welcome to hell." The alien council didn't believe him. When Captain Zivar transmitted his emergency report back to the Ular Dominion's High Assembly, they accused him of exaggeration, of letting a few skirmishes rattle his judgment. Even after seeing the footage, blurry images of humans building kill zones from alien wreckage, laughing as they hunted the squad like prey, The Council dismissed it as an anomaly. Primitive aggression, they called it. Unrefined tactics. Javar knew better. He had seen dozens of species fight. He knew the difference between chaos and calculated violence. What the humans did wasn't panic. It wasn't desperation. It was methodical, trained. As if war wasn't just in their culture, it was carved into their DNA. Back on Earth, the second recon drone had just sent back new footage. This time, it wasn't just a few armed locals. They had found something buried deep beneath a mountain, some kind of facility, camouflaged so well that even the Dominion's scanning tech nearly missed it. But once they found it, Zavar couldn't stop staring at the feed. Weapons, thousands of them, not just guns, devices, prototypes, machines even the Dominion couldn't identify. Some looked ancient, others far ahead of anything humans should have been capable of. Experimental weapons etched with warnings, handwritten signs reading, "Project Doomspill and for use only if God abandons us." And people, humans in uniform, working around the clock. "Sir," said a technician, voice shaking, We ran a comparison on the symbols found on their uniforms. It matches data from Earth's own archives, military emblems. But this isn't official. This group doesn't exist in their public databases." Zavar's eyes narrowed. "Then who the hell are they?" The technician hesitated. "We believe they call themselves the Bastion, a rogue defense faction, hidden, autonomous, possibly centuries old." "How many are there?" "We don't know. The signals are spread across multiple continents. It's possible there are dozens of these facilities." Zavar stood in silence, staring down at Earth like he was seeing it for the first time. Not a weak planet, not a backwater, a weapon cache. He finally understood why they hadn't been discovered before. The humans weren't reckless. They were patient. Every war, every revolution, every civil collapse, it hadn't broken them. It refined them, hardened them. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared. "Unidentified object approaching," shouted the navigator. It's coming from Earth." Zavar turned toward the viewport just in time to see it. A single missile, burning hot through the vacuum, screaming towards their orbit. They didn't think humans could launch that fast. They were wrong. "Shields up," Zavar barked. The impact rocked the Chiranax, sending half the crew crashing to the floor. Lights flickered. Fires broke out across the engineering deck. It wasn't just any missile. It was designed with Dominion tech. Modified. Upgraded. How had they gotten access? Then he remembered. The first scout team. Their gear. Their weapons. Humans didn't just kill. They learned. "Return fire?" his second-in-command asked, blood trickling from his brow. Zavar hesitated. His pride wanted revenge. His training screamed for a counterstrike, but something deeper held him back. A primal fear that the more they pushed, the more humans would reveal. And if this was only the beginning— "Not yet," Zavar said, his voice low. "We're not just dealing with another species. We've awakened something old, something made for war." There was silence across the deck as his words sank in. Then, a new message flashed on the central screen. Another Earth transmission. This time, video. A man stood in front of a ruined scout pod, Dominion rifle slung over his shoulder. Mid-40s, calm eyes, tactical gear, smiling. "We've read your history," he said. "You fight for conquest, for power, for ego." He stepped forward, gaze cold and steady. "We fight for the thrill of it." The screen went black, and for the first time in his long, blood-soaked career, Captain Zavar felt fear. The Dominion fleet arrived 2 days later. 10 ships, armed to the teeth, each one capable of leveling cities. The High Assembly had finally taken Zavar seriously, though they framed it differently in their official communiqué. A show of strength to suppress rising threats from Earth's primitive species. Zivar didn't argue. Let them think it was a show of force. He knew better. He stood on the bridge of the Cheranax, staring at the fleet formation glowing in orbit above Earth. Massive dreadnoughts hovered like gods over the planet, blocking out parts of the sky. To the average human looking up, they'd seem like new stars, or perhaps omens. But the humans weren't looking up in fear. They were preparing. "We've intercepted over a dozen human military broadcasts," the Coam's officer reported. "Encrypted at first, but now they're wide open, almost like they want us to hear." Zivar's jaw tightened. "Play it." The voice that came through wasn't the same man from before. It was a woman this time, clear, confident, and calm. "You want to dance with monsters?" she said. "Then come closer. We don't bite unless you beg for it." Her voice was followed by coordinates. A challenge. The council ordered a tactical strike. A single city, chosen for its remote location and low civilian density. They wanted a clean message. Submit or burn. Zivar didn't bother arguing. He had already warned them. The Dominion didn't listen to warnings. They only learned through blood. The dreadnought Valkyrian was selected to fire. It charged its plasma array and released a sun-sized beam toward the coordinates Earth's transmission had given. The city vanished. At first, the Dominion cheered, until 30 minutes later, when the Valkyrian went completely dark. No communication, no response, not even a distress ping. They tried to send a patrol to investigate, but before the smaller cruiser could reach it, a new object appeared in its path. Small, fast, human-made. It wasn't a ship. It was a carrier pod, full of soldiers in exosuits, hurling toward the cruiser like a comet. The humans had launched a boarding party into space. Zivar watched in horror as the live feed from the cruiser flickered. The crew fought, but it was chaos. These weren't untrained ground troops. They were specialized killers, moving like they'd done this before. Who the hell trains to board ships in zero gravity? Within 7 minutes, the cruiser was silent. Another ship lost. Zivar slammed his fist on the command console. "How are they doing this? They don't have the tech. They don't have the infrastructure." "They have something else," whispered his lieutenant. "They have intent." That night, another human message came through. This time, it was a recording of the Valkyrian's bridge, its command staff, executed, hung upside down in gravity locks like trophies. One of the soldiers walked past the camera, pausing long enough to whisper something before the feed cut. "Try harder." The Dominion ships locked their defenses tighter. Every gun charged, every soldier on edge. No one had seen this coming, except Zivar. He sat alone in his quarters, watching recordings of human history, wars, revolutions, genocides, political betrayals. He watched as humanity thrived in chaos, adapted to disaster, evolved in hatred. They didn't just survive war. They needed it. And now that the Dominion had given them one, they were going to show the galaxy what happened when you dared to fight a species that was built to destroy itself. And win. Zivar looked into the void beyond the viewport and whispered to himself, "We didn't discover Earth. We unleashed it." They tried diplomacy next. After the loss of 2 ships and over 300 soldiers, the High Assembly finally understood this wasn't a standard suppression mission. They sent a delegation vessel, a white flag ship, unarmed, with the finest diplomats the Dominion had to offer. It was supposed to open a channel, request peace, and establish negotiations. Zivar didn't believe it would work. Not because he thought humans wouldn't listen, but because he understood their game now. They didn't want peace. They wanted proof. Proof that the galaxy's most arrogant empires could bleed. The diplomatic vessel never made it to the surface. It was intercepted mid-descent, rerouted via a hacked guidance system, and landed deep in the Siberian wilderness. Dominion sensors lost track of the crew for nearly an hour. Then, out of nowhere, a new signal lit up their consoles. Live feed, broadcasted across every Dominion channel. The diplomats were alive, bound, blindfolded, and kneeling in a snowy clearing. Behind them stood 6 humans, dressed in mismatched combat armor and civilian jackets. One of them wore a Dominion officer's cape like a trophy. The same woman who'd spoken before stepped into view. She wasn't smiling this time. "You came to talk," she said, pacing behind the hostages. "But you didn't come to listen. So let's make this real simple." She pulled a Dominion translator collar off one of the diplomats and held it to her mouth. "We are not a species you conquer. We are not a species you monitor. We are not your next project." The feed cut out with a gunshot. Only one of the diplomats was returned, in pieces, stuffed into a Dominion cargo pod and launched back into orbit. A message burned into his severed chest armor. "This is mercy. The next time, we erase you." The Dominion Council panicked. No longer united in arrogance, they began debating retreat, escalation, even full-scale annihilation of the planet. Zivar listened to the arguments with a numb expression, knowing none of it would matter. The humans had already won. Not militarily, not tactically, psychologically. Fear was growing, not just within the Dominion, but across other species watching from the galactic fringe. Rumors spread, whispers in backwater stations, pirate hubs, smuggler dens. Earth is awake. They turned war into an art form. They don't fear death, they train for it. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was awe. Some species began pulling their observers off Earth. Others started forming quiet alliances with human factions. There were even reports of mercenary groups defecting to fight with the humans, for the thrill, for the chaos, for the ideology. Because for the first time in centuries, someone was standing up to the galactic order and laughing in its face. Back on the Kirinax, Zevar sat in his command chair, watching the latest footage from a drone they'd snuck past Earth's orbital grid. It showed a human base built inside the ruins of a pre-apocalypse city. Detroit, he believed it was called. What caught his attention wasn't the humans' training, or the captured Dominion tech they were dismantling. It was the wall, covered in writing. Thousands of names etched by hand. Some were Dominion, some were human, some were other. Beneath it all, a phrase scrawled in blood-red paint. "We remember every empire that came for us." Zevar exhaled slowly. This wasn't about territory. This wasn't about politics or expansion or defense. This was personal. The humans didn't just want to win. They wanted to humiliate, to burn away the myth of alien superiority, to show the universe that the species everyone dismissed as emotional, erratic, and savage had been training for this their entire existence. They were war incarnate, and now war had come home. Word spread like wildfire. The attack on the Dominion fleet, the butchered diplomats, the war wall, every piece of it leaked across the galactic net. Systems that had never even heard of Earth were now watching shaky footage of human soldiers using stolen alien tech like it was their own. Governments panicked. Empires braced themselves. For the first time in centuries, the order was cracking. But Earth wasn't finished. Not even close. Inside one of the buried facilities, this one somewhere in what used to be South America, an alarm sounded. Not a warning of attack. A launch sequence. Underground hangars lit up. Steel doors the size of city blocks slid open, grinding against decades of silence. Rockets, fighters, experimental orbital weapons, projects once buried by treaties, shame, or fear, now surged to life. Above the planet, Zevar watched as a cluster of sleek, black ships rose into the atmosphere. "They're leaving the planet," said the sensor officer, stunned. Zevar stepped forward. "Where are they headed?" The room was dead silent for a few seconds, while data streamed in. Then the officer whispered, "Every ship is headed to a different Dominion colony." No one spoke. It was a message. Humanity wasn't just defending Earth, they were spreading. Colonial systems across Dominion space began sending distress calls within the hour. Mining outposts, agricultural moons, research stations, places that had never even heard of Earth were now under siege. But the humans weren't killing indiscriminately. They were targeted. They disabled communications first, crippled defense systems. Then they walked in, surgical, efficient, terrifying. They took Dominion officials hostage, raided archives, downloaded centuries of military data, then disappeared without leaving a single soldier behind. What they left instead were messages, written in Dominion blood, spray-painted across shattered walls and torn banners. "This is for the slave camps on Calyx 5. For the children of Razathul. Remember Eros Prime." Zevar felt his throat tighten. The humans knew, not just about the Dominion, about everything. All the dark history, the buried atrocities, the campaigns scrubbed from public record, the kind of secrets empires killed to keep quiet. Humans were broadcasting them across the galaxy, one attack at a time. The Dominion's grip was slipping. Worlds began to rebel. Minor species started rioting, demanding answers. Some even turned their weapons on their own governors. Because if humanity, a species no one had taken seriously, could rise up and fight back, why couldn't they? Zevar stared at the map of active human movements spreading through space like wildfire, red blips lighting up across 3 sectors now. "This isn't war," he murmured. "This is infection." And it wasn't random. It was personal. These weren't just acts of vengeance. They were surgical strikes against the Dominion's soul. For every colony they hit, every secret they exposed, they dragged centuries of cruelty into the light. And somewhere in the chaos, one name kept resurfacing. The Bastion. They weren't rogue anymore. They were leading. Every strike traced back to them, every encrypted feed, every target, and no one, not Zevar, not the Council, not the Dominion's most advanced AI, knew where they came from, how they coordinated, who led them. But one thing was clear. The Bastion wasn't trying to win a war. They were trying to break an empire, one memory at a time. They weren't born in one place. That was the first revelation. The Bastion wasn't a single government, army, or hidden nation. It was a collective, a mosaic of the broken, the forgotten, the betrayed. Soldiers who'd been court-martialed for questioning command. Scientists blacklisted for refusing to weaponize their research. Survivors of Dominion Black Ops programs. Even civilians whose homes had been accidentally bombed during peacekeeping missions. They came from everywhere. And they had one thing in common. The Dominion had destroyed their lives. The files Zevar recovered from a raided human installation told fragments of the story, not the kind of story told in textbooks or on diplomatic floors. This was the version scratched into walls by survivors too angry to die and too smart to forgive. It started after first contact, long before the invasion. The Dominion had sent observers to Earth under a false peace initiative. They studied, took samples, infiltrated governments, whispered to corporations, weaponized human division. When chaos broke out, wars, disease spikes, economic collapses, the Dominion stepped in with a cure, with order, and in exchange, Earth gave them their poor, their prisoners, their debtors. It was slavery disguised as salvation. Entire generations disappeared into off-world rehabilitation programs. Parents told their children they'd be back someday. They never came home, but some escaped. And those who did remembered everything. The Bastion was born from that memory. Its founder was once a Dominion war asset, a young girl taken from Nairobi, trained in zero-G combat, then discarded when her usefulness ended. They left her to die on a mining moon. She didn't. Her name was Asha 19, and she didn't just survive. She thrived, built a resistance cell, took over a Dominion skirmisher, and then, quietly, over the next 10 years, she built the Bastion. Seaver watched a recovered video of her, standing before a crowd in a crumbling underground hall. Her voice was low, steady, sharp as a blade. "They wanted us forgotten," she said. "But we remember, and when memory becomes weapon, empires fall." Behind her, a massive screen lit up with Dominion emblems, each one crossed out. Below them, names, not of targets, of crimes. Operation Star Drought, Mass Relocation Protocol 7, the Razdal Erasure, and finally, Earth, Containment Project 01. Zivar gripped the console until his fingers ached. Containment. That had always been the word they used. Not destruction, not conquest, containment. Because somewhere, someone high in the Dominion had seen what Earth really was. A weapon. Asha 19 and her followers didn't fight like rebels. They fought like survivors turned surgeons, cutting deep, with intent, with purpose, not to overthrow the Dominion, to expose it, and they were winning. They called it Operation Purity. The Dominion's retaliation wasn't just a strike. It was a full-scale cleansing campaign. Fleet carriers by the dozens, orbital siege platforms, kinetic bombardment payloads the size of mountains. Every protocol that had once been marked too extreme for civilized use was greenlit in a single day. No more diplomacy, no more attempts to study or contain. The humans had embarrassed them, publicly, violently, and the Dominion had never tolerated humiliation. So they did what empires always do when afraid. They overcompensated. Zevar watched from the command deck of the Chiranax as the Earth offensive fleet moved into position. Over 300 ships now, forming an orbital net so wide that even the moon cast its shadow on their hulls. The Earth below looked quiet. Too quiet. Scans showed movement, but no response. No launches, no countermeasures. "They're waiting," one of the junior tacticians said. "For what?" Zevar muttered, almost to himself. Then the order came from High Command. "Commence planetary suppression. The first wave wasn't even meant to kill. It was designed to blind, to rip out the planet's satellite grid, scramble the atmosphere with electromagnetic pulses, and reduce every power grid to smoke and sparks." But the moment the first EMP detonated in the stratosphere, something changed. Every Dominion screen on every ship turned black. Then static. Then a single phrase appeared, etched in blood-red letters across the fleet's entire HUD system. "We warned you." The scream of alerts flooded the deck. Systems went offline. II cores scrambled themselves in a panic. Even the Chiranax, the fleet's flagship, began to flicker and groan like it was being torn apart from the inside. "Multiple ships losing control," someone shouted. "It's not a hack, it's a virus." No one had seen it coming. The Bastion hadn't just prepared for this assault. They had designed it. They let the Dominion build their pride, let them gather their forces, let them march into orbit like gods descending from heaven. And then they pulled the trigger. 1,000,000 dormant code packets hidden in Dominion comms since the very first contact with Earth, now activated at once. A digital plague, written in languages Dominion firewalls didn't even recognize. Ships collided, engines failed, targeting systems spun out. Some ships turned their guns on themselves before anyone could shut them down. And then, the humans came. Not in fleets, not in neat, disciplined ranks like Dominion strategists would have expected. They came in waves, raiding parties, stealth pods, exosuits launched directly from mountain ranges, makeshift orbital gliders loaded with explosives, bristling with salvaged alien tech. One by one, Dominion ships started dropping from the sky, trailing fire like dead gods. Xavar's hands trembled. This wasn't just war anymore. This was revenge. Down on the surface, the Bastion launched its final operation, codenamed Ashfall. The goal wasn't to destroy the Dominion's army. That would have been easy by now. The goal was to broadcast. Every planet, every Dominion system, every species watching, everyone now saw what the Bastion saw. A live feed patched into galactic networks showed Dominion officers torturing prisoners. It showed slave pens, chemical sterilization camps, genetic experimentation, worlds harvested of all resources and left to rot. Footage pulled from Dominion archives, spliced with real-time camera feeds of soldiers screaming inside burning ships above Earth. And then Asha 19 appeared again. This time not in some underground bunker, but standing on the remains of a Dominion dropship. Blood on her boots, ash in her hair. "No more secrets," she said softly. Behind her, a burning Dominion flag toppled. "No more silence." She looked into the camera, eyes like frozen fire. "You taught us how to suffer. Now we teach you how it ends." She raised her fist, and the skies lit up. The orbital defense cannons, once thought disabled by the initial EMP wave, roared to life. Weapons long hidden in Earth's crust, beneath oceans, inside glaciers, even within ancient mountain ranges, now revealed themselves. Built not by modern governments, not by world powers, but by survivors. By engineers who never forgot. By dissidents who refused to move on. They'd been building this response for generations. The Dominion never stood a chance. By the end of the day, half the fleet was gone. The rest limped away, retreating, broken, silent. Xavar stayed behind. He didn't order his crew to fight, didn't try to flee. He stood on the bridge of the Chiranax, watching the Earth slowly rotate beneath him, and whispered to no one in particular, "We created this. We made them monsters." And somewhere deep in his soul, he knew they had only seen the beginning. The war was over, but the galaxy wasn't at peace. What was left of the Dominion scattered like ash in a solar wind. Systems that once flew their banners burned them in public squares. Colonies that once bowed at their feet now hunted their governors in the streets. The empires didn't fall with a grand explosion. They rotted, fast and from the inside. But Earth didn't celebrate. No fireworks, no parades. Because the Bastion had one last message, one final broadcast, days after the last Dominion ship left Earth's orbit. Asha 19 stood beneath the shattered remains of what had been a Dominion consulate in Geneva, its once pristine walls now covered in the names of the lost. Millions of them. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. Her voice was tired, honest. "You wanted to know what we are," she said. "What we were built for. Now you know." The camera panned slightly. Behind her stood not soldiers, but families, survivors, children who had never known peace. Scientists who had cracked alien encryption just to survive. Farmers who had turned their fields into minefields. Every kind of human the galaxy had once dismissed. "We didn't want to conquer," she continued. "We wanted to live. But you made sure we could only live if we learned how to kill." She looked straight into the camera. "You built an empire on forgetting. We remembered everything." The screen faded to black. Then, a final image. "Let the galaxy rebuild. Without fear. Without you." And that was it. The Bastion didn't claim territory, didn't install governors or demand reparations. Earth remained quiet, its skies clear for the first time in months. The launch bays closed, the black ships landed and powered down. But the galaxy wasn't sure what to make of it. Some thought the humans were playing a long game, waiting to rise and rule from the ashes. Others believed they were too broken to continue, a flame burning too hot and too fast. Still, others whispered that the bastion wasn't finished, that there were other enemies, other monsters hidden behind flags and treaties and gold-plated promises. And deep down, everyone feared one thing more than war: silence. Because humans didn't say what came next. They just watched, waited. Xavar was taken alive, not by soldiers, not even by the Bastion, but by a group of civilians in a refugee camp he'd helped build, for optics, for propaganda. They found him hiding in a ventilation shaft of a downed cruiser and dragged him out into the light. They didn't kill him. They made him see. They forced him to walk through what was left of the Razthul archives. Let him read the real numbers, the death tolls, the classified experiments he'd signed off on without reading. Then they left him in a shack with a solar-powered screen looping Asha 19's broadcast. Over and over. It was said he stopped speaking after 3 days, stopped eating after 7, stopped existing, even as his body kept breathing. A symbol of a dying age. Elsewhere in the galaxy, a quiet revolution was unfolding. Species long considered lesser by Dominion caste systems began rising into their own. New alliances formed, not out of fear, but out of understanding. Small planets once bullied into trade pacts and military conscription started negotiating fairly. And in the middle of it all, Earth remained still, rebuilding, quiet, watching. But those who truly paid attention noticed something strange. The Bastion didn't disband. They didn't return to their homes and fade into memory. They spread, not to conquer, to guard. Outposts built in asteroid belts, listening stations planted near old Dominion border worlds. A ship seen every now and then in contested space, silent, black, marked only with a symbol. A broken chain, wrapped in flame. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. That no matter who tried to rise next, no matter what empire grew fat with power and pride, humanity would remember. And when memory becomes weapon, empires fall. As the years passed, stories became myths. The war turned into cautionary tales for cadets, bedtime warnings for children of rulers. And yet, those who had seen the humans never forgot. Not their weapons, not their technology, not the look in their eyes. Because when the galaxy had tried to break Earth, it had only revealed what humans truly were beneath the surface. Not diplomats, not allies, not even rebels. They were scars turned into strategy, pain turned into precision, war made flesh. And though peace bloomed in the galaxy again, it bloomed under the long, cold shadow of a species no one would ever underestimate again. Because now everyone knew the terrifying truth. Humanity wasn't just made to survive war. They were built for it. Perfectly. They called themselves the Valnari, a cold-blooded, pride-drunk species with sleek silver armor and ships that blocked out stars. For centuries, they ruled the outer systems with one rule: submit or be erased. Earth didn't even show up on their maps until humanity sent a mining probe too far into contested space. It was supposed to be a quiet operation. Dig some ore, fund a colony, move on. But humans had a bad habit of not asking for permission, especially from aliens who thought they were gods. The probe was shot down within minutes, a warning, but Earth didn't blink. Instead, they sent a message, short, blunt, and human as hell. "We're coming to get our stuff. Try and stop us." The Valnari intercepted the message, expecting laughter in their war chambers. But instead, silence fell. Because attached to the message was an image, one grainy still from a surveillance drone sent by accident, or maybe on purpose. It showed Earth's fleet, not graceful or elegant, not polished or shiny like Valnari war cruisers. No, Earth's ships looked like floating slabs of metal, ugly and brutal, covered in black armor, weapons stitched across every inch, engines that burned like hellfire. It was the kind of fleet built not for ceremony or pride, but for one thing: total war. Admiral Syrinx of the Valnari stared at that image for a long time. He didn't speak, didn't even blink, just narrowed his red, insect-like eyes as a sick chill crept into his bones. "What is this barbaric design?" one of his officers finally whispered. "Not design," Syrinx murmured. "Instinct." Because something in those ships spoke louder than strategy or tech. It screamed of desperation, of a species that had crawled through mud and fire just to survive. A species that hadn't known peace in centuries, but had learned to turn a pain into fuel. And then came the reports. Battles, skirmishes, Valnari squadrons vanishing in asteroid belts, interceptors torn apart by railgun slugs the size of freight trains, a battleship cleaved in two by a human dreadnought ramming it, on purpose. They weren't just fighting humans, they were fighting madness wrapped in steel. Ships with names like Retribution, Blood Price, Forgive Us Not. Names that sounded less like warships and more like final confessions. Syrinx watched as sector after sector went dark. Planets burned. Fleets retreated. The humans didn't speak much. They didn't boast. But they didn't stop either. And when the Valnari High Command demanded a meeting to assess Earth's threat, Syrinx only said one thing: "We made a mistake. They don't want peace. They want us to bleed." Still, the command didn't listen. Not until Earth's fleet appeared at the edge of the Valnari core system, engines howling, guns hot. 1,000 ships strong, led by the SCS Ashes of Terra, its hull scarred with every war humanity ever fought. That's when Syrinx saw it again. That look. The same one he saw in the fleet image. The same look he now saw in the eyes of their pilots, visible through cracked glass and war-painted cockpits. It wasn't hate. It was something worse. It was purpose. The first shot wasn't a warning. It came from the Ashes of Terra, a rail cannon slug that tore through vacuum like a divine hammer. It punched a clean hole through the Valnari outer defense station, one of their proudest achievements, something they believed to be impenetrable. It shattered like glass. No speeches, no countdowns, just death. That was Earth's way. The rest of the fleet followed in silence, hundreds of ships swarming in like vultures, spreading wide across the system in a crescent formation that didn't care for beauty or tradition. It was a slaughter formation. Every vessel bristled with weapons, and every gun lit up as if it had been waiting centuries for this exact moment. The Valnari scrambled. Their fleets were fast and agile, sleek serpents in the void, gliding on plasma trails. But humans didn't fight like dancers. They fought like avalanche and firestorm. For every graceful Valnari cruiser, 3 human destroyers would crash into it like iron fists. Not dodging, not maneuvering, just overwhelming, and they kept coming. Valnari Command broadcast a desperate signal to all defensive stations. Hold the line, use swarm tactics, strike and retreat, do not engage directly. But Earth's fleet didn't give them the option. The SCS Hell's Memory barreled into a swarm of Valnari fighters, releasing hundreds of drones that didn't bother targeting. They just collided, exploded, or latched on, and tore ships apart like parasites. Somewhere in the chaos, a Valnari commander tried to open comms, barking in their sharp, clicking tongue. "We demand a ceasefire. This is a misunderstanding. Earth, stand down." The only reply was static. and then a human voice broke through. Low, gravelly, calm. "No misunderstanding. You took one of ours. Now we take everything." The Valnari didn't know how to fight this. Their empire was built on fear, on psychological dominance. But the humans? They didn't fear death. They expected it. They had perfected the art of dying with purpose. Suicide runs were common. If a ship was too damaged, it didn't retreat. It plowed into the nearest Valnari target, detonating nuclear cores and shrapnel bombs that turned space into a meat grinder. And the humans kept talking, not on public frequencies, but to each other. "We got one of theirs. That makes it even." "Number it doesn't. Not yet." "Save the last torpedo for their command ship. I want them to watch us coming." The Valnari started retreating. A full-scale pullback from their outer moon stations. For the first time in their empire's long history, they abandoned territory. They'd never had to before. Every other species had bowed or been broken. But not Earth. Earth bit back. Admiral Syrinx stood aboard the VLS Dominion's claw, his hands shaking as he stared at the tactical map. The humans weren't pushing like they wanted conquest. No, they were spreading like rot. They weren't aiming for military objectives. They were burning population centers, orbital farms, energy silos, anything that made life livable. It wasn't strategy. It was punishment. "This is not war," whispered one of his aides. "No," Syrinx answered coldly. "It's a message." But what was the message? That they would never stop? That Earth had turned pain into doctrine? Or was it that somewhere, deep in their history, humanity had made a decision? That if anyone ever tried to erase them, they'd make sure it was the last mistake anyone ever made? A new ping flashed on Syrinx's console. Incoming transmission, human flagship, priority message. He opened it with a shaky claw. A woman's face appeared. Hard eyes, scar across her brow, wearing a blood-stained uniform. She didn't blink, didn't smile. "You came for minerals," she said. "You left us corpses." Her voice dropped into something cold, something final. "Now we give you graves." The transmission cut. Seconds later, a barrage of thermonukes launched from Earth's second wave fleet, and Syrinx knew, without a doubt, that the end had just begun. The Valnari homeworld, Jareth, had never tasted fear. It was a jewel of precision, floating crystal spires, gravity gardens that sang with color, and a skyline dominated by the shimmering domes of its command citadel. It was a world that believed in superiority, raised on the certainty that no threat could ever reach its heart. But now, sirens howled across its skies. Admiral Syrinx stood in the Grand Council chamber, flanked by trembling ministers and generals who no longer spoke in arrogance, but whispers. The chamber's giant war map, once a proud display of Valnari dominance, now showed a red tide consuming their core systems. 14 planets lost in under a week, entire fleets shredded, trade routes gone, civilians flooding transport hubs, begging to flee. The once proud Valnari Empire was collapsing, not from years of war, but days of rage. "They've reached the Tanari Gap," said Commander Velrek, his voice barely steady. "There's nothing left between them and us but Home Guard Fleet Alpha." A voice from the back snapped. "And what good is Alpha if morale's already broken? They're not fighting to win anymore. They're just delaying the slaughter." Syrinx slammed his fist onto the console. "Enough. We are not children." But even he couldn't deny the truth. The humans weren't fighting to claim land or resources. They were fighting to erase. It was retribution. Systematic, relentless, and scarily personal. "They know where to hit us," another general muttered. "They're not targeting strength. They're targeting shame." He was right. The humans had bypassed major military installations and gone straight for places like the slave colonies of Threx 9, where the Valnari had kept prisoners of war in underground labor pits for decades. Earth didn't liberate those camps. They vaporized them, broadcast the explosion live. And that wasn't all. Somehow, human AIs had infiltrated their communications grid. Every Valnari terminal now played hacked audio logs, recordings of Earth's soldiers, families, and civilians killed in cold blood when the probe was shot down. Their last moments, their screams. One looped message kept playing on a ghost frequency. You wanted silence. Now we make you hear it. In desperation, the Grand Council turned to the unthinkable. The Omega Protocol, whispered Chancellor Lareth. Deploy it, before they reach orbit. No, Cyrix growled. You don't understand. You think this is a war we can still win, but the humans, they've already decided what they are. The chamber went silent. He continued, his voice hollow. They've decided they are extinction, and they're willing to burn with us to make sure we go first. Even as he spoke, orbital alarms screamed louder. The ashes of Terra had entered visual range. It looked worse now, its armor warped, venting black steam like breath from a beast, not a ship. A monument to vengeance. And behind it, hundreds more, spilling from subspace like swarming insects. Still, the Council voted. Omega Protocol, approved. It wasn't a weapon, not exactly. It was a signal, a frequency that bent psionic fields, meant to fracture the minds of lesser species, break their will to fight. It had worked before, on weak minds, on creatures that feared pain. But when they activated it, nothing happened. No retreat, no panic, no madness. Instead, Earth's fleet surged forward faster, more focused than before, like the pain only made them sharper, stronger. Cyrix whispered it under his breath, the realization so cold it made his lungs seize. They don't fear pain. He finally understood what the Valnari never could. Earth had never been the strongest species, never the smartest. But they were the ones who survived their own darkness, the ones who learned to wear trauma like armor, who carved their dead into war chants and loaded grief into torpedoes. The Omega Protocol had failed. And Earth was now over their skies. The sky over Jareth turned black. Not from nightfall, but from the shadow of Earth's fleet blotting out the suns. The Valnari capital, once the shining center of their empire, now sat beneath a ceiling of fire and metal. The citizens had never seen war up close. They'd always watched it from a distance. Conflict was something that happened out there, far from the glow of their perfect world. But today, war had come home. The ashes of Terra hovered directly above the capital spire, engines growling like a beast ready to strike. Its hull was scorched, bearing the scars of 1,000 battles, pieces of fallen ships fused to its sides like trophies. It wasn't here to negotiate. It wasn't here to conquer. It was here to finish what Earth had started. Inside the command deck, Captain Mara Voss stood like stone. Her uniform was torn at the sleeve, soaked in dried blood. Some of it hers, most of it not. Her eyes were raw with exhaustion, but sharp, focused. She stared at the capital's coordinates, her finger hovering above the fire command. Targets locked, her weapons officer said quietly. Valnari High Command confirmed inside the spire. One strike ends their leadership. But Mara didn't press the button. Not yet. Because she wanted them to watch. Open wide frequency channel, she ordered. Seconds later, her face appeared on every screen across Jareth, hijacking news feeds, emergency broadcasts, even personal terminals. No theatrics. Just her, standing against a backdrop of fire-lit steel. You thought we'd beg, she said flatly. You thought we'd roll over like the rest. But you misjudged us. She leaned closer to the camera, her voice colder now. When you killed our miners, you thought you were silencing a problem. What you really did was wake up a graveyard." She turned slightly, showing the names engraved on the wall behind her. Thousands of them. Not soldiers, not heroes, just people, civilians, workers, children. "We came to get them back. Now we're staying to bury the ones who took them." Then she nodded. Just once. "Fire." The orbital railguns hummed, and in one unified roar they spoke. 7 tungsten rods, each the size of a skyscraper, dropped from orbit. No explosives needed. The sheer velocity turned them into planetary knives, slicing the Capitol spire into dust. It collapsed in a soundless flash from space, but the ground told a different story. Shockwaves rippled for miles. Glass shattered. Towers folded. Ash clouded the sky. The Valnari High Command died in seconds, along with every last official who had signed the order to shoot down Earth's probe. Syrinx didn't die there, though. He had already evacuated, but not out of cowardice. He had seen this coming. He'd watched Earth's fury rise like a tidal wave, and knew there was no stopping it, only surviving it long enough to understand why. From a small bunker far from the blast zone, he stood watching the clouds of smoke cover his city. The spires, the song gardens, the museums, all of it, now rubble. "Is this victory to them?" one of his aides whispered. "Genocide?" Syrinx shook his head. "Number, this isn't genocide," he murmured. "It's a lesson." And they were the example. But the worst part wasn't the destruction. It was the silence that followed. Earth didn't celebrate. There were no chants, no declarations of triumph, just the deep, still quiet of something final. They didn't want parades or surrender. They wanted closure, and closure didn't leave anything standing. A new feed crackled through the emergency line. Another message. Mara Voss again. "This is not peace," she said. "This is the pause before we move on." And that was when Syrinx knew. They weren't just punishing the Valnari. They were warning everyone else. Across the galaxy, silence fell like a blanket of fear. From the icy cities of the Ural Confederation to the lush nebula colonies of the Centauri Accord, every species with a communications array had seen the broadcast. Some didn't believe it at first, thought it was propaganda or deep-faked terror theater. But when the orbital sensors confirmed the obliteration of the Valnari capital in real time, there was no more doubt. Earth hadn't won a war. Earth had made a statement. In the Galactic Union Hall, delegates from over 60 species gathered in emergency session. No formal speeches, no pleasantries, just whispered panic and trembling claws typing messages to homeworlds. The Valnari chair sat empty, still smoldering from the symbol of their vaporized empire, the shattered emblem of a once feared species now reduced to dust. "Have the humans sent demands?" asked High Speaker Trevin of the Centauri, her wings twitching. "They haven't sent anything," growled a Gorathi elder. "Just silence, like they're waiting." A trembling AI from the Binar Collective offered an analysis, voice glitching as if even it feared speaking. "They erased a galactic superpower in 8 days. Minimal losses, no occupation. This wasn't conquest. It was retaliation, surgical and symbolic. And it was efficient." "Efficient," Trevin snapped. "They dropped orbital spears on civilians." "No," the AI corrected. "They dropped orbital spears on decision-makers. The humans knew exactly where to strike. The civilians, they warned them. 3 hours prior." Gasps rippled through the hall. It was true. Earth had sent automated evacuation codes to every non-military sector. Evac pod bays were unlocked. Transit routes cleared. They didn't want to kill everyone, just the ones responsible. But the ones who stayed, well, Earth had made it clear. Stay with your leaders, or leave them to burn. And now, Earth's ships were motionless, still in orbit around Jareth. They weren't advancing. They weren't pulling back, just waiting. Then the humans sent a message. Only 4 words. No ambassador, no context, just text, burned into every Union channel like a scar. Who's next to try? The effect was instant. The Trelawney Empire declared neutrality within the hour. The Drak Confederates, once vocal about humanity's uncontrolled aggression, signed a non-aggression pact and offered tribute. The Zorathi Syndicate, who had once considered enslaving Earth during their pre-FTL age, publicly erased all records of that plan and issued an apology broadcast across 10 systems. The galaxy didn't just fear Earth now, they respected it. Because for the first time in centuries, the unspoken rule had been broken. Empires could no longer act with impunity. Power wasn't protection anymore. Humanity had taught the stars something ancient, something primal. If you corner a species that has survived its own extinction more than once, it will teach you what desperation looks like with a gun in its hand. Back on Earth, the mood wasn't celebratory. It was quiet, heavy. Captain Mara Voss walked through a memorial hall where the names of the lost shimmered across stone panels, endless and sacred. Children's toys sat at the base of some, miners' helmets, burnt patches of uniforms. It was all there, preserved, not as a reminder of war, but of why they went to war. A young ensign walked beside her, hesitant. "Ma'am, was it worth it?" She didn't answer right away. Outside, people were rebuilding. Ships docked. Farmers tilled artificial fields again. Earth wasn't richer or safer, but it was heard. Mara finally said, "They needed to learn." The ensign frowned. "Learn what?" "That humans might die standing," she said, voice low. "But we never kneel." And somewhere, in the far edges of the galaxy, another species watched and took notes. The galaxy didn't sleep anymore. Not after Earth's vengeance scorched an empire to ashes and dared the stars to speak back. Every major species, once bold, bloated with self-importance, now moved with caution. Words were measured. Fleets withdrawn. Ambassadors trained in new protocols, all built around a single terrifying truth. Earth had changed the rules. No longer the backwater, no longer the quaint, primitive world climbing its way through the stars. Number Earth had shown the universe it wasn't just a player. It was a warning etched in fire. But power never exists in a vacuum. And not everyone watched in fear. In the murky edges of the Luridian Shroud, where cartels ruled and ethics died, the Shi'ev Syndicate held court in rusted megastations built from stolen fleets. They trafficked species, sold weapons to rebels and kings alike, and prided themselves on one principle: no one could touch them. They were ghosts in the dark, untouchable. So when Earth's fleet wiped the Valnari off the map, the Syndicate didn't bow. They laughed. "An emotional display," hissed Overseer Vesh, the Shiv's cold-blooded leader, his voice like razors dragging on glass. "Humans lack discipline. They strike with heart, not calculation. Rage is not strategy." His underlings nodded, more out of fear than agreement. "The humans left Jareth intact," Vesh continued. "They didn't harvest, didn't loot. They burned and moved on, a waste." To Vesh, Earth was a hammer, brutal, loud, and easily misled. And hammers could be baited. That was the plan. The Syndicate would hit something small. Not Earth directly, of course. That would be stupid. But something close enough to provoke, just enough to test the edges of their fury. So they chose Calera 7, a border colony co-managed by humans and a few minor species. It had a defense grid, modest trade, and more importantly, it was known to house descendants of Earth's diaspora. People with human blood, human names. The Sheev hit it without warning. No broadcasts, no ransom. They sterilized the orbit, turned the food reserves into slag, then landed to make a statement. No weapons, just poison gas, burned flags, and a message carved into the ground. Come find us. And Earth did. But this time, they didn't send a fleet. They sent one ship, just one. It arrived without lights, without fanfare, a black craft no larger than a cruiser, bearing no official markings. But the moment it entered the Luridian Shroud, every Sheev listening post went silent, and those that tried to track its path, they simply vanished. Vesh didn't understand at first. He paced his throne room, frustrated, waiting for retaliation that never came. "Cowards," he snarled. "Too broken to respond." But then, slowly, reports began to drift in. First, Sheev outposts, hundreds of light-years apart, were going dark within minutes of each other. Then, black box recordings of something breaching their shields without touching them, like shadows melting through bulkheads. No explosions, no firefights, just screams. Then silence. Then, the name. Project Revenant. It was whispered across the black market networks, panicked voices over encrypted lines. No images, no survivors, only a growing pattern. Where the Sheev had laid their trap, Earth had sent something far worse than a fleet. They had sent ghosts. Vesh panicked, ordered a retreat, pulled all assets from Kalara and beyond. But it was too late. The Revenant didn't come with ships. It came with a message, beamed into every Shiv ship simultaneously, Vesh included. A woman's voice, calm, steady, familiar, Captain Mara Voss. "You asked us to come," she said. "You burned our blood, marked your message in our soil." A pause, then colder. "Now we mark you." And then it began. One by one, Vesh's stations were hacked. Not for control, but for humiliation. Every file, every sale, every brutal secret of the Shoiv Empire was broadcast to the entire galactic net. Names, faces, deals, slavery contracts, species blackmail. It was no longer about vengeance. It was exposure. In less than 48 hours, the syndicate collapsed, not by missile or torpedo, but by truth. And still, the black ship hovered above their last station. Vesh stood trembling on his deck, watching as his empire bled out. His last words, before a silence unlike any other swallowed the feed, were bitter. "They didn't kill us, they unmade us." Back on Earth, in a dim command room beneath the Atlantic arcology, Mara Voss stood with her arms crossed. Her officers waited for orders, for applause, for some sign this mission was over. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. Instead, she looked out the viewport at a swirling galaxy that had learned something dangerous. Humanity no longer needed armies to fight wars. They only needed a reason. The galaxy was changing, and Earth stood at the center of it. No longer a junior race begging for scraps. No longer a planet dismissed in backroom treaties. After Jareth burned and the Sheev Syndicate was dismantled by whispers and shadows, every power, old or new, began adjusting to the new order. And the new order had a name: the Terran Accord. It wasn't a government. It wasn't even a formal alliance. It was an idea, a doctrine, one built on fear, yes, but also on respect. You didn't cross Earth. You didn't provoke Earth. And more than anything, you didn't lie to Earth. The Accord established new terms of engagement. Every species was given a seat, on one condition: no slavery, no exploitation of developing worlds, and no preemptive strikes against non-hostile civilizations. The punishment for breaking those rules wasn't economic sanctions. It was erasure. And nobody wanted to test it again. But the bigger Earth grew, the more dangerous it became. To itself. The cracks didn't come from outside. They came from within. In the shadows of Earth's rise, a growing number of voices began to question everything. Politicians who had ridden the wave of vengeance now feared the beast they helped unleash. Soldiers who'd survived the Valnari front lines watched as their medals were replaced with classified orders and silencing protocols. Scientists, once hailed as heroes, were now shackled to research centers hidden deep underground, forbidden from speaking about what they'd really built during the war. One of them was Dr. Lena Marik. She had designed the stealth neural interface for Project Revenant, the system that allowed a single pilot to command a squadron of autonomous AI drones, effectively giving Earth the power to ghost any enemy installation within minutes. But Lena hadn't signed up for assassination or erasure. She'd signed up to protect. And now she couldn't even look herself in the mirror. They'd called it defense, but it had become a religion, the gospel of retribution, and like every religion, it had its zealots. Enter General Elias Drex, once a war hero, now a figure of growing concern inside Earth's own command structure. He believed the Terran Accord wasn't enough. To him, fear alone wasn't sustainable. He wanted dominance. Full-spectrum control of the galactic lanes, defense grids on every trade corridor, black site bases on uninhabited planets. He wasn't content with being respected. He wanted Earth to be worshipped. "We've won," he said during a covert speech to high-ranking officers in the Pacific Bastion. "But we've only just begun. If we don't take control of the narrative, others will. And we all know how fast fear turns to rebellion." He proposed a new initiative, Helios Directive, a sweeping protocol that would authorize Earth to preemptively neutralize any emerging military threat before it became a problem. No diplomacy, no trials, just cold, decisive action. Some clapped, others stayed silent. Mara Voss wasn't invited to that meeting, but she heard about it within the hour, and she was furious. "This wasn't what we fought for," she growled to the new Earth Council, slamming a report onto the table. "We struck back because they provoked us. We burned Jareth because they murdered our people." "And what happens," one counselor asked carefully, "when the next empire decides they don't like the rules?" "We deal with that then," Mara replied. "We don't become what we feared." But the council wasn't listening the way they used to. The fear was fading. The thirst for power was growing. And somewhere deep beneath Luna's dark side, Helios Directive had already gone operational. The first target was a minor relay station on the edge of Zentari space, a listening post that had begun collecting intelligence on Earth's fleet movements. The Zentari weren't enemies, not yet. But they weren't trusted either. The station went dark overnight. No explosion, no debris, just gone. The Zentari sent a formal inquiry. Earth denied involvement, and Mara Voss knew they were lying. That night she met with Dr. Merrick in a hidden chamber below the Atlantic Arcology. No guards, no cameras. "I need to know everything about Helios," Mara said quietly. Lena hesitated. "You really want to open that box?" "If we don't stop it now," Mara said, "then we're not Earth anymore. We're just another empire waiting to fall." Lena exhaled. "Then you'll need more than intel. You'll need proof, witnesses, allies. Because once you go against Drex..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Earth had become the monster they once feared. And now, someone would have to bring it back from the brink, even if it meant civil war. The moment the transmission leaked, the world changed again. A corrupted signal intercepted by a Zentari freighter just outside the Damar line, broadcasted across unprotected channels. Someone had messed up, or maybe someone wanted it to be found. It was grainy, scrambled, and clearly never meant for public eyes, but the words were unmistakable. "Target confirmed. Initiate Helios Protocol, Wipe all organic presence. Full deniability authorized. The ship it referenced. Eleron Station, a Zentari diplomatic outpost, non-military, neutral, and Earth had erased it. Within hours, the Terran Accord was in flames. Alliances ruptured, ambassadors recalled, trade routes shut down. Galaxies away, frightened species watched the rising smoke and realized what many on Earth already knew. The peace was a lie. Earth wasn't holding the line anymore. It was tightening it around the galaxy's throat. And at the center of it all stood General Elias Drex, fully unmasked. In the name of security, he'd approved silent strikes, black site prison ships, and the ghosting of any station that even resembled a threat. His dream was a galaxy ruled by fear,